Hello everyone, sorry for this somewhat funky lighting. I can't really help my lighting situation at the moment, but we have a new Muse Kit box in front of us. This is my first video of 2024 and this is for the February Muse Kits box. I didn't do anything last month because frankly, I had a lot of stuff going on and I don't usually post in January anyway. It's the start of a new year, readjusting to life, getting back into school, you know the drill. But I'm very excited for this box because I've seen what's in here ahead of time and everything that's in this box is very applicable to me right now because not only is it a material that I really like, but the subject matter that we're going to be focusing on with this box is something that I'm currently doing a class for. So let's just open the box on up and I'll show you what's in here. We've also changed things up since last year. So now instead of doing weekly prompt lists with very specific prompts, it's going to be a month long following just one prompt word. So there's a lot more creativity that can come from just one prompt word. So it's a lot easier to do your weekly drawings, and that's what I'm going to be doing for this one. So we have a very packed box in front of us. And it looks like for Valentine's Day, because it's February, we have got some Smarties that have little love messages on them. Very cute. And then you'll see we have quite a bit of charcoal in this box. So this is willow charcoal. These are essentially charcoal sticks that are extremely soft. They're often used in sketches for charcoal pieces and studies. These are blending stumps, something that's very commonly used when doing charcoal or pastels or anything that is a very soft material. I use them for charcoal all the time. They're one of my go-tos, though I do have some other things that I definitely prefer over these. These are awesome and I do use them quite a lot. And then we have 3 white charcoal pencils. This is super exciting because I've been using charcoal for a very long time and my preferred method of charcoal is to use toned paper, so I can use white charcoal pencils and black charcoal, so you can get some really nice, really pretty highlights with that toned paper. I'm very excited to have these. And then we have a whole set of charcoal pencils which look awesome. These are woodless charcoal pencils and we have a soft, medium, and hard blend. Usually I work with medium and hard, but we'll try to use the full range as we're working on all of our things today. And then we have not 1 but 2 kneaded erasers. Again, wonderful. This is perfect. When you're working with charcoal, it's best to use kneaded erasers rather than a regular eraser because when you have charcoal, you have a lot of loose charcoal pigment that's going to be flying around. And if you're trying to erase that with a regular eraser, you're going to get eraser shavings everywhere. And you can't just wipe it off with your hand or blow it off because that's going to get the charcoal everywhere. You're going to smudge your drawing. So it's best to have something that doesn't create those eraser shavings at all, and kneaded erasers are the perfect solution for that. And then right here we have some hard brown pastels. So this looks like it's an entire range of just brown pastels. Absolutely beautiful. Look at those colors. We've got a lot of different dark browns. We'll have to swatch them to see how they really look. I like soft pastels. I haven't worked with them in a while, but I have made quite a few pieces using pastels, so this will be very fun. I'm very excited to dip my toes into pastels again. Again, we'll have to swatch them just to see how they look. And we can take a look at this booklet that they sent us. I can look through this at a later time, but soft pastels, very fun, very excited to work with those. And here it looks like we have a sketchbook, specifically a Hanamule sketchbook, really great brand. They're one of my go-to paper brands, especially for watercolor stuff. Really great company. It's a mini sketchbook. It looks like it's got 60 sheets and it's 120 GSM, so not great for painting, but really nice for charcoal drawings and other dry media pieces. And then here we've got a Faber-Castell eraser. We can probably use this for our pastel pieces. This looks pretty tough, pretty durable, so it shouldn't be too soft and messy while you're using it. We have got our sticker, which, wow, that looks pretty. That is really cool. This looks like it was made with oil pastels or something. Very neat, very interesting. And then we have a little wooden figure guy. I'm sure that you guys have seen these. These are a classic in the art world, one of those little wooden guys that you can pose, so we'll have to get this guy out of his box and play around with him. And then the big thing in this box is a huge thing of Hanamule paper. So everything we have in terms of paper is all from Hanamule, great brand, and it looks like we have 30 sheets of this paper. Very nice. For all of the content that I'm going to be making over on their channels, I'm going to use what they gave me, but when I'm working with these, we're using toned paper because I really like toned paper. And because I don't have the zine in the box, I might as well tell you what we're going to be doing. So this month is a focus on, if you haven't guessed based off of the little guy, we're doing a figure drawing, specifically focusing on figure and the human figure, which is perfect for me because currently I'm in a figure drawing class. This entire semester, I'm in a figure drawing class. So I've been actively working with willow charcoal. We haven't quite broken into charcoal pencils yet, but like I said, I've been using charcoal a long time. I pretty much know what I'm doing. These supplies are all very familiar to me, and I've been doing lots and lots of figure drawing. So this is something that's definitely in my wheelhouse and something that I can give quite a lot of advice on and tips and tricks. So again, here is everything in the box. There is a lot that we were given this month, so I'm gonna do a whole bunch of swatching and then we'll get into making some stuff. I'm not gonna show the stuff that I make for all the monthly content. You can go see that over on their channels. Here's all the links, I'll just put them up on the screen for you. And we're gonna dive right into swatching these supplies and then making something out of it. Okay, so the very first thing that I actually ended up doing was chopping up this huge sheet of toned tan paper and putting it all over my sketchbook into various different shapes and different orientations of rectangles, so that way I could play around with different compositions, different ideas, and get an idea of what I might want to make with these supplies. I knew I wanted something that would let me play with a lot of contrast, since we have some very dark charcoal and pastels along with that super bright white charcoal pencil, so I really wanted to use that to my advantage and make something that would have really dark shadows, really bright highlights, and just really pop with that toned tan base. And because I haven't mentioned it yet, I might as well say now that the theme for this illustration that I'm going to be making is Disney fairies, specifically like Pixie Hollow, that sort of thing. Because I grew up with the Disney fairies, I absolutely love them, and recently I've been doing a TikTok series where I break down all of the designs and outfits that the Disney fairies wear, including all of the characters from the books, not just the movies. That's been a huge thing for me right now and a huge source of inspiration. I recently made a whole piece that's centered around the Disney fairies, and I'm still very much in a fairy mood, so I wanted to create my own light fairy illustration to still work with contrast and capture figure. So not any particular fairy that already exists, but my own original fairy. So this may be a little bit of a shorter video than I thought because I started doing a little bit of sketching while I was at school because I had a little break in between my classes, and I was like, okay, I'll just pull out my pencils and come up with a couple ideas off camera, see what I can come up with, and then do the rest while I am back at home and filming. But I came up with a composition that I really liked basically instantly, which was a problem because I didn't film it. So I did 3 different ideas for this one composition because I think I would like to do a more portrait style format, something that still lets me focus on the character while still capturing light in a really fun way. So I came up with an idea for what I want my light fairy to look like, and I did this little composition, 3 different compositions of placements of her on the paper, and I think I like the vertical one more because I think it captures more of her figure better and allows me to focus on lights a little bit better. So I did both of these thumbnail sketches. This one she's a little bit lower, this one she's a little bit higher. I think I like this one a little bit more. I'm just a little upset that I couldn't do any sketching on camera. I already came up with this idea and I really like it, and I don't want to fill out the whole sketchbook spread when I think I already know what I'm going to be doing. So I think I'm just going to get started with sketching, talk about charcoal in the voiceover, and my whole process for making the piece that you are about to see. At least this means this will be a shorter video, which will be easier for me to edit, so I guess that's okay, and it changes things up a little bit. You're pretty used to seeing me have a very standard format for these videos at this point. I open the box, I swatch the supplies, I then do some sketching, and then I make something. So maybe I'll just chop some of those pieces out and give you a nice, short, and concise video that's to the point about charcoal today. With that being said, here comes Theoden. Hello again, sir. With that being said, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start sketching and you'll start hearing everything that I have to say in the voiceover. So let's move on and get started on that. One thing I can say is I love filming in 0.5. Filming in 0.5 is very, very fun. It lets me actually be able to zoom out and you guys can actually see the entire thing that I'm working on. Alright, the very first thing I did when starting out this illustration was just starting off with my very basic sketch of the figure of this character, starting with the head, creating lines of action, and then little lines to represent where the arms are, little connecting circles to be the elbows, some ovals as hands, just very loose drawing at the moment, and then I gradually build out that form little by little as I start working on the character and adding more refinement to the body. And then I had to take a mandatory cat break because Theoden demanded that I take a cat break, so here is me petting Theoden, and then he decided to try to sit on the illustration. Thanks a lot, Theoden. I really, really appreciated that. But then anyway, I scooted him out of the way and I started working on the drawing again because he was just standing there and would not leave, so I scooted his boot, and I just kept drawing. Another thing you may be noticing with this illustration is that it's not exactly the most realistic in terms of anatomy, even for my style, and that's because I'm trying to reference the style of the Disney fairies a little bit more closely than I do with my original art style, which yeah, does have larger facial features and a bit of a larger head than regular realism. However, with this one, I really wanted to match more of the style of the Disney fairies, so I made the body a little bit skinnier than I usually do just because that is the style of the Disney fairies. So the anatomy isn't 100% correct, however, I'm still capturing the essence of how a realistic figure would function. The limbs are still a realistic length, the body is still a realistic length, the head is just larger than I would usually draw it in comparison to the body because of the style that I'm aiming for with this one. You'll also notice that as I'm working on this sketch, I'm refining it as I go along. So you'll notice that I noticed that the head was larger than I would have liked at first. So I actually went back and erased some of my lines and remade my line of action. And then I improved the form of the body from there and I made it match more what I was looking for. I completely redrew the chest area, the hips, and the legs. I redrew it a few times actually just because I wasn't liking the way it was looking, but gradually I was able to build it out and find a form that I liked. So this is just a little bit of encouragement to let you guys know that yeah, you can go back and redo your body if you screw up. It's not the end of the world if you don't do it right the first time. Now, you may be looking at this next step and wondering, wait, why am I adding line art? There's no pen in this box. You are correct. There is no fine line or pen in this box. However, with my illustration style, I rely heavily on line art. And since I'm using materials that require a lot of blending and a lot of smudging, I felt it would be best to use a fine liner in this case. That way I can still have my lines in place and I'm not constantly smudging stuff all over the place. And I still have an idea of where things are going to be going as I'm shading and adding pigment from the charcoal and the pastels. You'll see where I'm going with this and you'll understand why I'm going to be adding line art, because the technique that I use to blend is outside the realm of what we were given in the box, and I'll show you what it is in just a second. This is a technique that not a lot of people know about, that I found out about through a YouTube video quite a while ago, and it's a technique that I use all the time, and it's using a form of blending media that you probably won't expect, but I really like it and I swear it works, and you just have to see me use it in order to believe it. Okay, here's where we step into the realm of the insane, where I talk about my blending technique, and brace yourselves because you're not going to be ready for this and you won't understand until I explain it. Okay, so the way that I blend pastels and charcoal over large surfaces is not by using blending stumps, it's not by using paper towels or even tissues. It's by using toilet paper. I'm not kidding. I use toilet paper to blend out my soft pastels and charcoals over large areas. Specifically, I use very cheap, the really cheap, papery texture, really thin toilet paper that you can get at the dollar store. The reason why I use this, especially on toned tan surfaces, is because toned tan paper, specifically from Strathmore, is a very smooth type of paper. It's my paper of choice for doing charcoal projects because it's so insanely smooth. It allows for a really good blending surface, and when you use toilet paper, it's even less textured. Essentially, using this really cheap toilet paper allows me to get a really smooth blending effect. Because both surfaces are so smooth, it doesn't make any charcoal get stuck in any grooves or textures within the paper, and because the toilet paper itself is so smooth, there's no added textures that are being added as I blend it. You can see me blending it out here very smoothly with my fingers, not applying too much pressure. It evenly disperses the charcoal over the entire surface as I work. It's super smooth, it's really nice, and what's great is that because the toilet paper is so thin, it doesn't pick up any of the pigment with it, so I'm not losing a whole bunch of pigment as I'm doing this. When you're using blending stumps, you often get lots and lots of dust as you're working, but when you're using toilet paper like I am, it picks all that up and it doesn't make it go everywhere. It's a lot cleaner, it's so much smoother, I really love it. I know it sounds insane to say that I use toilet paper for this, but trust me, it works. I'm hoping that as you guys are watching, you're able to see that this is working really well for me, and you can see why it's my blending media of choice when I use things like charcoal and pastels, because I swear, it works so good and I love it. So hopefully now you guys see why I was so adamant that I have line art in this piece, because imagine if I was doing this with the charcoal pencils as my line art instead. Like, think about how much that would be smudging as I'm going over it so many times with the toilet paper, just blending out to get these deep shadows. And again, this kind of plays into the technique that I'm really using with these pieces. I love using toned tan as my base for anything with pastels and charcoal, especially if I'm working in a monochrome color palette or a brown color palette, because it allows me to have a base already set up. I already have a mid-tone established, finished with this tone tan paper, so all I have to do is build up shadows and build up highlights. It allows me to remain a lot more consistent with my shading and really plan out where I want my shadows and highlights to be. I even used a bit of the black charcoal at the very bottom because I knew that I was going to have the least light at the bottom of this illustration, and I wanted the light to be focused around the top since I envisioned light to be coming out of her hands in these beautiful little swirly star-like shapes. This is a very predictable thing for me. I draw stars and light like this literally all the time in these little spirally shapes, and I thought it would be really fun to experiment with doing them in charcoal this time because I've never drawn them in charcoal before. I've painted them, I've drawn them with pens like fine liners, painted them before with gouache, I've drawn them digitally before, but I've never used them with charcoal, so that was a first. I did end up using the blending stumps after a little while just because the toilet paper isn't the most precise thing ever, so I really only use toilet paper when I'm covering a large area. Then if I'm doing something that has more fine details, clothing, the hair, and the face, I'm gonna use the blending stumps for that. They are a little bit more textured, so they're not my favorite thing ever, however they do get the job done pretty nicely. And again, just a nice thing about using tone tan paper is that it really lets me place where my highlights are real easily because I don't have to worry about erasing and getting eraser shavings everywhere or accidentally erasing something incorrectly. Whereas if you're working with just white paper on a white surface, you're probably going to have to do a lot of erasing. If that's something you enjoy and that's part of your style, then that's totally great, and I love that you can do that. It's just not my preferred thing when I'm working with pastels, so I prefer to really let my white highlights pop instead of relying on an eraser. You'll also notice that I did end up using the toilet paper to give her wings a little bit more of a glow, just because fairy wings do glow in Pixie Hollow in that world, so I wanted to match that sort of vibe. I still wanted to keep the light source at mostly the top of the image though, so I didn't make the wings too bright, but I did use my white Signo pen to give them a nice little faint outline, just to get that idea across. The one downside to this technique though is that even though I used line art because I was using so many pastels and charcoals, the line art did get washed out a little bit just because of how many layers I was building up and as dust was flying across the page. And when you're using charcoal, you can't exactly go over it with line art again, so I feel like the line art did get washed out a little bit, but I think that's just a sacrifice that I had to make for the piece in general. And besides, whenever I do end up posting this piece or scanning it, I could always just up the contrast and that could fix the problem too. But that's one thing to be aware of. If you decide to follow this technique that I'm using, definitely know that your line art will look faded once you're done if you're working with a lot of layers, because that's just what's going to happen if you're layering something that's as chalky as pastels are on top of it. And then my last little detail that I added after doing all of the shading on the figure and establishing all the lighting for the background was adding all those stars that I was talking about, making her have all these little lights. Because as a light fairy, there's a lot of things they can do, but I've never seen a light fairy playing around with actual beams of light before, so I thought that would be fun to do. So that's what I wanted to play with for this piece without making her look too bright, because light fairies are very, very bright, and I want the lights themselves to be the highlight of this piece so I can really play with the charcoal, and I think I was able to achieve that pretty well. Alright, here is the finished piece. It's not my best work, especially for an illustration. Given that charcoal and pastels don't allow for quite as much control and they don't allow for quite as much precision as I usually do with my illustrations, I think I did a pretty good job with what I was given. I really utilized blending of the pastels to my advantage, and I used the charcoal just a little bit for white highlights. My technique mostly focused on blending for this one, and again, I was just trying to capture this cute little fairy. Nothing too complicated. I don't expect this to look like a huge masterpiece, so for what materials I was given to use and to challenge myself with for this box and for this month, I think I'm pretty happy with the result. Again, I've used charcoal pretty often, usually not for illustration work. I usually use it for portraits and sometimes animal pieces, but it was fun to stretch myself and challenge myself to make an illustration with charcoal and pastels, especially since I haven't used pastels for quite a while. But I hope you all enjoyed the video and were able to learn something about charcoal, and I encourage yourself, if you have charcoal or pastels, or if you have the supplies from this box, to just play around with it, see what you can do, mess around with blending, try different styles, see what you can do with these supplies, because there's a lot of fun things you can do with charcoal and pastels if you just experiment around with them for a little bit. Hope you all enjoyed the video. You can always like, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. Be sure to check out my Etsy store and my other social medias, and be sure to stay tuned for other videos that I have coming up soon. With that being said, I'll see you all in my next video. Bye everybody.